It's fascinating to think about how these approaches could work together. But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's shift gears for a minute and look at some real-world examples of deep canvassing in action.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty. I mean, so far we've been talking pretty conceptually.
Absolutely. Let's get specific.
Do you have any, juicy stories from the trenches?
I do, actually. One of our sources, a case study on a recent political campaign, has a really compelling example. It involved a canvasser. Let's call her Sarah. She was trying to persuade voters in a pretty conservative district to support a progressive ballot initiative.
Okay, so a tough crowd.
Yeah, you could say that. The initiative was about environmental protection.
Interesting. How'd you even approach that?
Well, instead of launching into a lecture on climate change or renewable energy, she started by simply asking people about their personal experiences with nature.
Smart.
Yeah, their favorite childhood memories, outdoors, places that held special meaning for them, that kind of thing.
Reading people where they are.
Exactly. And as people shared their stories, often with a lot of detail and passion, Sarah would gently guide the conversation toward the environmental challenges facing their community.
I see.
She'd ask questions like, what do you think your grandchildren will experience if we don't take action now? Or what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
So appealing to their values, their sense of responsibility, instead of just throwing facts at them.
That's right. And the results were pretty amazing. Many of the people Sarah spoke with, people who were initially skeptical or even hostile toward the initiative, ended up changing their minds.
No way.
They signed petitions, volunteered for the campaign, and ultimately voted in favor of the initiative.
Wow, that's incredible. It shows that deep canvassing can actually work, even on those really divisive issues.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's be real, it's not always going to be that easy.
Right. Deep canvassing is not a magic bullet. It has its limitations.
Like we were talking about before, it's time consuming.
Yeah, it can be very resource intensive. Training canvassers to have these nuanced conversations takes time and effort.
And then there's the scalability issue. It works great on a small scale. But how do you reach millions of voters with this kind of approach?
That's a good point. It's unlikely to replace traditional campaigning completely.
Right.
But it can be a powerful addition, especially for grassroots movements and engaging undecided voters.
Okay, so it's a tool in the toolbox, not a magic solution.
Exactly. And like any tool, it needs to be used wisely and ethically.
Now, what about street epistemology? We've talked about how it focuses on the how of knowing, while deep canvassing is more about the why of believing. How do those two approaches actually interact in practice?
That's a great question. It's something I've been thinking about as well. On the surface, they do seem quite different.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Street epistemology often involves these structured dialogues, very
Yeah.
focused.
Yeah.
Deep canvassing is more about open-ended conversations, meandering through personal experiences and values.
Right, right.
But I think at their core, they both aim to promote deeper understanding and critical thinking.
I agree.
So I think there's a lot of potential for cross-pollination between the two.
That's interesting.
For example, deep canvassing could benefit from some of the techniques of street epistemology, like asking clarifying questions to help people really articulate their beliefs, or gently challenging inconsistencies.
I see what you mean.
And street epistemology could learn from deep canvassing's emphasis on building rapport, connecting with people on an emotional level.
Because logic alone isn't always enough.
Exactly. Even the most airtight argument can fall flat if you're not connecting with the person on a human level. It's about finding that balance between head and heart.
I'm curious, are there any actual examples of people combining these two approaches?
There haven't been any major studies yet, but there are definitely people experimenting.
Really?
Yeah. For example, some political organizers are training their canvassers to incorporate some elements of street epistemology into their deep canvassing conversations.
Oh, cool. Like how?
They might ask questions like, what are the main reasons you hold this belief? Or can you think of any evidence that might challenge that view?
So it's not about ditching one approach for the other, but finding ways to integrate them.
Exactly. And I think this kind of hybrid approach could be valuable in all sorts of areas, not just political campaigns.
Right, like everyday conversations.
Yeah. Interpersonal relationships, community dialogues, even online discussions. It could really make a difference.
Speaking of online discussions, you know, it makes me think about this heated debate I got into online recently. I really wish I had some of these deep canvassing and street epistemology tools back then.
Oh. Tell me more. What happened?
Well, it started out innocently enough.
Hmm.
I commented on a social media post about a pretty controversial news story. I was trying to be balanced, acknowledge both sides. But then things just blew up.
People got upset.
Yeah, people started attacking me personally, twisting my words. It was just exhausting.
Sounds like a classic case of an online discussion gone wrong.
It was. And I admit, I got defensive, I started arguing back, and it just turned into this negative spiral.
Do you think using some deep canvassing techniques could have helped?
Looking back, I think so. Instead of jumping right into debate mode, I could have tried to understand where those other people were coming from. I could have asked about their experiences, their values, why they felt so strongly about it.
And maybe some street epistemology could have helped shift the focus. Instead of arguing opinions, you could have explored the reasoning behind those opinions, the evidence.
Yeah, that's a good point. Instead of saying you're wrong, I could have asked, what makes you so sure about that? Or can you help me understand your perspective?
It's about changing the tone of the conversation, turning a battle of egos into a genuine search for understanding.
That's a great way to put it. I can't go back and redo that debate, but I can definitely apply these insights to future conversations.
Absolutely. And I think that's a valuable takeaway for everyone, whether it's politics, personal relationships, online discussions. These tools of deep canvassing and street epistemology can help us communicate better and connect on a deeper level.
It's about building bridges, not walls.
Exactly. And isn't that what we all want? A world where we can disagree without being disagreeable, where we can listen to each other and learn from each other, even when we don't see eye to eye.
That's a great goal to strive for. So we've really gotten into the nuts and bolts of deep canvassing.
They have.
Its strengths, its challenges, even how it might work with street epistemology.
Yeah, lots to think about.
But before we wrap up, I kind of want to zoom out a bit. Big picture time.
Okay.
What does all this mean for the future of thought itself?
That's a big question, but I do think both deep canvassing and street epistemology, they suggest a potential shift in how we approach dialogue and disagreement.
Oh, interesting. How so?
It's like we're moving away from that combative, winner-takes-all model of debate.
Yeah, that gotcha mentality.
Right, and moving towards something more collaborative, more focused on understanding.
So it's less about owning the other side, more about actually learning from each other.
Exactly. And it's not just about being nice or avoiding conflict. It's about recognizing that beliefs are complex.
They are.
They're nuanced, often tied to personal experiences and values.
It's about realizing that people aren't always clinging to their beliefs just to be stubborn.
Right. They might have good reasons, even if we don't agree with them.
And by trying to understand those reasons, by engaging with empathy and curiosity, we open up the possibility of genuine connection.
Maybe even persuasion.
I know some people might be skeptical, like, oh, here comes the kumbaya stuff. But I genuinely believe there's something powerful here.
I agree.
If we shift our focus from winning to understanding, maybe, just maybe, we can start to bridge those divides that seem to be tearing us apart.
I think deep canvassing and street epistemology, they both offer tools to do just that.
Interesting.
Frameworks for having those difficult conversations, for navigating sensitive topics.
For connecting with people who see the world differently.
It's a reminder that it's okay to disagree, but it's not okay to dehumanize.
That's a great point.
Ultimately, I think that's what the future of thought should look like. Rigorous debate without sacrificing empathy.
Challenging ideas without attacking each other.
Learning, growing, and building a more understanding, more compassionate society.
Beautifully said. And on that note of hope and possibility, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
I think so too.
We've explored the ins and outs of deep canvassing, considered its implications for how we think and interact.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But as always, the real journey begins now with you, our listener.
What resonated with you today?
What will you take with you from this conversation?
And how might you apply these ideas to your own life, your own conversations?
Those are the questions we leave you to ponder. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep those minds open, and most importantly, keep those conversations flowing.
Farewell, and may your future thoughts be insightful, engaging, and a little bit transformative.